Hello and welcome everyone to the InetSoft's Style Intelligence 2020 new release webinar. We're excited that so many of you were able to make it to the live webinar to tune in. My name is Ben and I work in marketing here at InetSoft, and with me here is Katie Rousset, who is a systems engineer here at InetSoft. I'll be briefly going over some of the product updates, and then Katie will be demoing some of those updates in more detail. And there will be time at the end for questions, so if you have any questions, just enter those into the question section in the Zoom webinar panel. One of the major feature updates in this release is the new data connectors for 73 different cloud-based web sources with catalogs of their API endpoints. You can connect to and update these sources on the web without needing Style Studio, although you can still use Style Studio if you'd like. You can do database queries for these sources through the worksheet. This reduces the need for software installed on your machine, and it also makes the process easier. We have a new dashboard wizard with charts and table recommendations. Now, when you are starting to build a chart and you select which columns to include, the wizard will recommend chart types or table types based on those columns. And as you add columns or take them away, the wizard will change its recommendation. This makes building dashboards easier for people who don't have a lot of experience in it. And for those who are experienced, the process will go even faster. But if you'd like to use the full chart editor, that is still an option. We've also added some new chart types in response to customer requests. These charts used to require a script, but they are now just another option provided in the chart editor. We have tree map and circle packing, as you can see in the dashboard here. Also sunburst, icicle, box, and Marimekko. The Ad Hoc Report Wizard has also been updated. So when you customize or make style changes to parameter sheets in the Ad Hoc Report Wizard, whereas previously you needed to exit out of the wizard and see the report to see the results of the changes, you can now see the change instantly. This should make reformatting your reports easier and faster. We also have new date hierarchy options on tables. These include day of month, hour of day, minute of hour, second of minute, and a few others that you can see in the image here. We've also added drill down and drill up icons to tables. Now you can have parts of the table expanded by default when you load the dashboard. A few other feature updates. We now have a single sign-on tab for popular single sign-on third-party providers like SAML, OpenID Connect, and Auth0 integration. Throughout our product, view sheets are now referred to as dashboards. You can now resize both properties panels and also condition dialog boxes. Dremio JDBC drivers are now fully supported. And you can now set maximum and minimum ranges on calendars, but this requires a script. Okay, so in just a moment, we're going to transition over to Katie for the live demo. And once again, if you have any questions, just enter those.
All right. Well, thank you, Ben, for going over that nice introduction to some of the new features of 2020. A couple of little housekeeping notes is that you'll definitely want to review the release features and upgrade notes for a couple of things for from an administration perspective. One thing that you will note is that our web app name is now root, and so it will no longer be /SREE/EM or the report portal. It will be just skipping that SRE that has been in the product for quite some time. So we're now running as root. There are a couple of notes about the JIRA data source being transitioned into REST, and a couple of other properties that have been updated. So you'll want to double check the release and upgrade notes for those when you are going through the process of upgrading to 2020 to make sure whether or not you are affected. As mentioned during the slideshow, single sign-on now actually has a user interface for implementation for some of the standard mechanisms for single sign-on out there. You would just be going to your security page within Enterprise Manager and going to the new SSO tab that is located here to begin your configuration of this. So the goal is that for new implementations of single sign-on that are looking to leverage any of these technologies will be simpler to configure than in the past. So that's a nice little enhancement to have from an administrative perspective. So I'll just go ahead with that. All right, so big fun new things within the user portal. Now, as with always, different actions that you can do in the user portal can be controlled through security. So if you choose to not empower the users to do things like design dashboards or create ad hoc reports, or if you are particularly, say, a dashboard only or report only user, obviously certain features might not pertain to your particular implementation. But just to go over some of the new things, as introduced, we do have 6 new chart types that you can do just through basic data binding, where you select a particular chart type and you set those data bindings. So I have just like some simple examples there of the tree map, sunburst, circle packing, icicle, Marimekko, and box, just so you get a visual, since only 2 of them were covered in the slide deck. So just a little lightweight introduction to some of these new chart types that no longer require scripting to have them easily in your dashboards. As mentioned before, there has been a nice optimization for the look and feel of parameter sheets that are designed within the ad hoc reporting tool. So if I enter into ad hoc mode and I go into my parameter sheet, I can actually look to make visual changes such as fonts, formatting, colors, not all of which used to be reflected direct in the designer for your ad hoc report parameter sheet. You used to not be able to see the actual visual changes. You didn't have a preview option to see whether or not something was being cut off, and you have to completely save and preview to be able to actually run the report again, completely see your changes, and then make adjustments. Now you can do more rapid back and forth, just all within the preview, and then, you know, going back out of preview. So that is all okay. See from now, big ones, right? We mentioned if you are looking to empower creation or you need to create new data sources, you can easily manage and maintain your data sources as of 2019 via the web. One simple example is that I can see that the data sources are connected. So that is something that was in 2019, and you could have new data sources, but it used to be a drop-down list where you actually had to deploy special connectors that we had. That connector library has been expanded, and the page for the data source connection has been enhanced to allow you to actually pick specific data sources. This means that if you were using our out-of-the-box generic REST, JSON, or REST XML connectors, now you might be able to directly connect to the specific web API, the REST-based data source that you're looking to connect to. And so with this, you're going to have a more pointed fill-in for the specific types of connection information. However, we do still have those generic multi-connectors that you can always adapt to additional REST data sources as needed. One of the great things is that you can now also very easily access endpoints that you've defined for these different data sources. So if I were to actually go and create a new data worksheet, if I happen to have a web service such as SurveyMonkey, for an example, instead of getting some very complicated interface, I'm actually getting the list of endpoints that the API specifically for, in this case, SurveyMonkey, is going to come back, and depending on which endpoint I pick, the specific variables and driven filters that you can pass to that particular endpoint are prompted for, so that way you can actually put in the specific information and have it lead into a simple query data block within your data worksheet, and it's going to allow you to very easily query that information. And as you can see for the new data worksheet, step-through wizard, it actually wants me to give my worksheet a name right away, and it will place the data block in the named data worksheet and connect to. Now this is actually looking to do a live connect to the SurveyMonkey, so it might take a moment for it to retrieve the metadata and pull that back. So I'm just going to go ahead and close out, so that way we're not waiting for my connection to SurveyMonkey to finish authenticating. But it's going to give you a really great way to create new data sources and create new data worksheets just direct from this listing here, with leveraging the new APIs for more rapid development, where you don't necessarily need to go back to Style Studio to do so. Now, the big feature that is coming with this version 2020 is our new view sheets relabeled as dashboards permanently, the new dashboard recommender or wizard. So when you actually go to create a new dashboard, you can always do it the more traditional way, where you just select the particular data set that you want to work with and go to OK and get the standard dashboard editor that you've been getting in Visual Composer with version like 2018, 2019, with the minor enhancements around that. However, you can also enter into Open Wizard. Now, once you're in Open Wizard, it will actually jump right into a visualization recommender. Depending on the data source or data set that you've chosen to work with, if it happens to be a data worksheet, you would see the appropriate data blocks listed out. Because I chose a data model, I'm seeing the appropriate entities labeled out here. And I can expand to now select the particular fields that I want to use. So it's just checking them off. Now, immediately, as I start saying, oh, I want to use this text-based column, product category, it will start to say, what can I do with this field? Only this field. If I back off, it's like, oh, okay, we're starting again from scratch. If I start with, hey, what if I do something with just a measure? You'll notice that in some cases, you might actually get other options like a lightweight gauge with our option for a gauge, or even a chart. Depending on the situation, you might jump to utilizing the chart and utilizing it for different counts, distinct counts, whatever it is. As I grab different fields, if I am introducing too many variables, it might make more sense to use something like crosstab. And then it's like, hey, why don't you look at the data in this way? Why don't you look at the data that way? I can jump to a detail table. So the recommender will allow me to see the data from different points of view in a rapid way without having to say, well, let me play with my data in a crosstab. Let me play with my data in a chart. Let me play with my data in a detail table. I can now do all of that side by side by side by jumping back and forth. Now, what you'll notice is that when I am in the chart recommender, it will give me options like, what about a scatter option? How would you place that? What about doing more of a radar style? How would you do that? And then if you say, okay, you know what, no, I don't want this particular design here. As you can see, it's going to give me simple ways to control things like what calculation it's doing. Is it doing a sum? Is it doing an average? Is it doing a number and stock? But as you go into this, you might say, you know what, I really want more specific controls over my chart. I do want a chart, but I want to do very specific controls over the chart as I am creating and selecting. I can enter into full editor. So then this is back to the traditional data binding, where you can select specific charts. Now, once you start making certain changes, you're not going to necessarily be able to jump back to the wizard, so that it's saying like everything would be lost for specific changes if I go back to the wizard. I'm now defaulting back to the wizard recommender and the way that it defaults the chart binding. So that is something to keep in mind, is that once you go into very specific binding in a full editor, you wouldn't necessarily be able to jump back into the wizard if you've made multiple recommendations and customizations. Once I jump into finish, what you'll notice is that we're in a lightweight layout mode for quick wizard design of a dashboard, which means that I go to place my next component, and I'm back in my recommender. So I can go ahead and I can stick with, yeah, no, I do want the gauge type view. Okay, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to add another element. I want to, have this be a filter component, have it be a list. Go into my next component, and maybe I actually do want to, with my few fields, create a standard, crosstab. As I do this, it's going to assign general spacing and size based off of the type of component I'm selecting in the recommender, and it's going to allow me to continue to place components in this lightweight grid. Once you select continue, you're not going to be able to get back into the wizard aspect of it, but you can also always go back into the visualization or recommender for the binding. So you'll notice I'm now in full layout view, so now I can do freeform layout. So it's not going to be going back to that lightweight grid. However, if I were to enter in to make changes to my chart, to make changes to my table, because I left it in the visualization recommender versus full editor, I am able to now make changes that I want to make to this chart depending on, maybe I've changed my mind, and now I can go in and I can start to size my components and maybe adjust the layout as I prefer for my dashboard as I'm designing. So the recommender is going to give you a way for rapid viewing of your designed components for different calculations, different chart types, chart versus table, do rapid, what about this, what about this, what about this, and make choices. And the great thing is that by seeing it different ways, you might have thought, oh, I never thought that I would actually, use my data that way. It's going to give you that lightweight way of, having it give you different options without you having to have the forethought of, okay, I want to explicitly go in and do a specific chart type and make those specific configurations. It's going to allow you to explore this a little bit more. We believe that this is going to make dashboard design a lot easier. And you're like, well, can I actually get into that visualization recommender once I'm no longer in that wizard grid mode? And the answer is yes. You could start with either a chart or a crosstab, drag and drop, just like before. When I click the edit, I am in the visualization recommender. So even though I added a chart, if I were to go in and select a few key fields that I want to see my details on, it might even recommend, hey, I started with the chart, and it's like, hey, you know what, I think maybe you should start with a table. And from there, we can go ahead and, make certain changes and make adjustments to how we want things. Easy conversion of dimension to measure through simple buttons here. Very easy way to see the summary or detailed information depending on what we're looking to do right here. So you can see it's saying, oh, this is a measure, oh, this is a dimension, and then maybe applying specific formatting depending on the situation. Now, you will be able to very easily do the rapid formatting as you had done previously with the dashboard designer. Starting in 2018, the format panel is still going to be there when I am back to my visual composer view. However, when I am in this recommender, it's not the same as the full binding editor. It's not going to have you applying filtering here. It's not going to have you doing right-click properties. It's only going to have you picking fields and exploring various data binding depending on, the details that you want to see, what kind of information you're looking to really design and stylize into, say, a detailed table like I am currently putting together onto my dashboard. So as you can see, I can set different settings and so on if I want to set the sort order. So I can still do various different changes here, but when I go ahead and I select finish, I now have an additional table where I had dragged and dropped my chart out. So when you're designing, you can always get into the visualization recommender. That is a key thing to remember, but you wouldn't be able to jump back to the lightweight wizard where it's, you know, add component, add component, add component. Here you have to explicitly start with dragging out a component into a position, but once you enter into edit, you can go into that visualization recommender and explore playing with various combinations of your fields. And in some cases, you might find that, hey, I never thought about visualizing these two fields together in this way, and it's going to give you that illumination by doing those different changes. So that's a great thing to have, and it is one of the main features, along with those additional chart types actually being, you know, explicit binding, and all the new data sources that are available. Those really are the major features that are going to be a part of version 2020. Now, there are some minor features that we haven't necessarily made note of yet. The scheduler, when you're doing the ability to save to server in terms of an action with a scheduled task, the new scheduler options will include ability to restrict the server locations available for that action, and the ability to automatically append a parameterized suffix to the file names for such actions. So that's a really great enhancement for those that are looking to leverage that feature. That is a great feature to have in mind and keep available. When you are doing dashboard design or even ad hoc design to dashboards, normally for the charts you can do a right-click, right-click condition, right-click plot properties, etc. We've now introduced a ... menu where you can also have those same right-click options. So then you get a single left click to be able to enter into that. As I mentioned before, it's something that you can also see in the user portal. So if I jump back to just looking at my dashboard here, I can do a ... to do any of the ad hoc options that I would normally see, such as annotate component, when I would do a right click on this chart. So it's going to be just a little bit easier for some that don't think like the right click is very obvious. Having this simple menu will give an easy way for doing that. I believe that we already mentioned about this is something that a lot of people found, in particular when you were dealing with something like advanced options for writing scripts or doing filter conditions on components. It was always like, oh, and now having scrolling in this dialogue. Well, now you can also resize the dialogue to maybe give yourself a little bit more workspace. So that was a nice little feature enhancement that we did mention during the slideshow, but it is a really great thing to have in mind. And I think that on a whole, for some of you, in particular the style scope users, maybe not the style report users, with the advanced enhancements to creating new data sources just in the web portal, it will allow you to do more rapid connection and design, whether it's in your local development environment or direct on production for any new data sources you're looking to onboard. And it will give you a great way to be able to, you know, do those creations of lightweight query blocks just direct in the worksheet builder. So you're already familiar with the query builder for doing it against relational data source types, but now you're going to have that endpoint option, but it will need to do the live connect, pull the metadata, to establish the data block. And as I mentioned before, I wasn't going to have us wait for it to do the reauthentication to my SurveyMonkey to do that live on the webinar. But some of these are some really great enhancements that we think are going to make your designing a lot easier. Some of the features that you might have noticed with the whole new Enterprise Manager, for those that maybe aren't as familiar, maybe you only saw the 2018 release webinar. We did not do a release webinar for 2019, but the new look and feel for the Enterprise Manager continues to roll in. So that was from 2019 now into 2020. Just little things that you'll see variations or little enhancements on throughout both interfaces will be in place. You might notice like little enhancements here and there, but overall, we think dashboard design has really been given a great enhancement with this wizard and recommender. I think that that's really all we wanted to show for you. I mean, I could do as many different visualization recommendations and play with the data for as long as we could possibly think of. I could spend an hour showing you different combinations, but I don't think that would really be practical. So I think what I'll do is I will turn it back over to Ben for questions, and we'll see about addressing anyone's questions and wrap up the webinar from there.
Thank you, Katie. We do have a number of questions here, but if anyone else has them, now would be the time to enter them. So, first question, someone is asking, is Style Studio still needed for reporting?
Yes, so we have not relocated full report design at all. It is still fully within Style Studio, and you can still also perform data source management, query management, data model management. That is all still within Style Studio. But with being able to establish new connections within the web portal, if you happen to be establishing a new data source connection or just needing maybe even to update a password, right? So many times you'll have a password expiration on, say, like a relational database that you have to do once a month as an administrator, and always you would have to, do it in your development environment, in the studio, and then push it out to production. Even just having the lightweight data source management that we introduced in version 2019, now having it more enhanced in version 2020, that interface continues to get easier to use. It's really great to be able to just lightweight make a change, like update the password right on production if you need to, so that way you don't have any sort of downtime with your data source connection if there ends up being a hiccup with that. So yes, Style Studio is definitely still the designer tool of choice for advanced reporting, and it is still the tool of choice for data models and existing queries. However, for establishing new data sources or just querying any of your existing data sources in the worksheet layer, you can just, establish those query data blocks real quick, let them do the quick query execution to pull the metadata, and save that worksheet and design a dashboard off of it right away.
Okay, next question is, what are the implications of migrating from 2019 to 2020?
So with all upgrades, it is always recommended that you do backwards compatibility testing of your assets to make sure, because we do have a transformation process for each version of the assets into the new version. There might be some minor enhancements and changes, and we never want it to affect the visual outcome of dashboards or reports, but it's always good to do a walkthrough, a walkthrough in a development environment of those assets ahead of time. With custom integration points, obviously there may be that you need to, recompile custom security classes, little things like that will need to be, done as you do with any version upgrade. And as mentioned, the big thing from 2019 to 2020 is that now the web app is running as root, so you're no longer at /sree. This means that if you have integration points where you've integrated our application to, say, your website, or just because your users might have web URLs bookmarked, they would need to update those links because the actual structure of the URL would be different. So that is a bit of a change to make, but on a whole, we find that this will be a better enhancement for moving into the future. So that's why we made that change.
Okay, next question is, can I still use the old style editor for charts?
Yes. So if I didn't quite make that clear, for existing charts that you already have, they would not pop into the visualization recommender. They would be in the standard edit binding for a chart or the edit binding for a crosstab, those components will still have that traditional full editor. Now, it might have been a little bit interesting because I had done full editor specifically from one of the newer chart types with like a tree map or a Marimekko, because they actually, instead of having an XY, they have like a T section for specific binding. Is kind of like our maps that have a geographic section for binding. But yes, you would just be able to use the traditional XY, color, shape, size, set a specific chart type, and then do all the various controls such as, top 10 or sort orders or, adjustments of calculations, et cetera. So you would be able to still do that explicit controls. And as I mentioned, that might have gotten missed, you can always make these changes, but at a certain point you might not be able to roll back into the recommender without losing those customizations. So you might be, staying in full editor for that particular component moving forward for the rest of its existence within your dashboard.
Next question is, where can we find a complete list of the new data connectors?
So in terms of a new list of the data connectors, I don't believe that in the actual feature listings that we have on the website, like we mentioned that we have new connectors for the different web APIs as just like a generic note. What you would want to do is you would want to either actually look to install in your local development environment, actually work on the upgrade with 2020, because you would be able to just explore that data source page directly and get to know that list. However, you can see each of those data sources documented within our documentation. So that is a place that you can always look to review any available data sources that are in that listing right there.
Okay, there's another question from the same person, which is, for web data sources not included in the update, is there a way to connect to them without using Style Studio?
So depending on what standard that particular web service adheres to would really dictate whether or not we would be able to connect to it out of the box. So we do have what we would term a generic REST API for JSON return and REST API for XML-based return that you can configure that gives you various toggles for things such as how it does paging, how that API is paging, for declaring the specific endpoints, for putting in the specific authentication aspects of it. However, if it is more of a custom API, such as if you think of Google Analytics, Google has its own API for its Google Analytics. Google has its own API for Google Sheets. So in that circumstance, our generic REST connector would not be applicable. In those circumstances, you can always reach out to us in terms of asking about that particular data source, because we actually will be continuing to release new data sources with the next, we expect that this list will continue to grow as more data sources become more popular and upon request, but we could always pursue potentially creating a custom connector depending on the situation, either through services or just because we're looking to make that enhancement. So feel free to reach out and ask about any particular data source that is not in this list currently, just that we know that it's even a data source that you're interested in. Since we started with this library of data sources based off of things that had been inquired about in the past, or also ones that just seem to be popular based off of research.
Okay, someone is asking, are the data loader and object data interfaces still supported?
If you're speaking about our old Salesforce data loader that we provided as an out, it was an external connection, it was an external interface that was actually doing an ETL process into a database, that particular system would be independent of the particular version of InetSoft you're running. So that would not be impacted by this. However, you can pursue using our new Salesforce connector that actually is live against the API, so that way you no longer have to rely on that ETL process if you're looking to do so. Obviously, it would take some time to work on reworking your assets, because with the API queries, you need to query different components of that and map them out and say like a worksheet. in terms of bringing together some of those different API endpoints, but it is certainly something that you can pursue. Now, if we didn't quite understand what you meant by data loader and so on, feel free to, reach out if you have specific questions, even about 2020 in general. You can always send those specifically to your account manager if we didn't get your questions right here, and we can look to get them addressed by an engineer about your specific implementation, or if there was anything specific you had questions on because of a specific feature you're using.
Okay, another one, someone was asking, is it possible to set the default table expansion without using a script?
Yes. So that was something that I didn't specifically design into any of my default examples for the cross-tab hierarchies. That is something that was put in place. It is something that I would think that if it was a little bit of a pain point for you in the past in terms of utilizing hierarchies within crosstabs, I would definitely say that, get your development environment upgraded, start on the upgrade path, and explore that feature on some of your existing hierarchies, get a feel for it, and obviously if there's any feature feedback for any of these new features that anyone has, we would always look to receive that feedback, because it could be that we can further enhance these new features in future releases as well.
Okay, so that's all the questions we can take now. If you didn't hear your question addressed, we will be in touch with you via email to address it. But also, we'll be sending out an email to everyone who registered for this with a link to a video of the webinar, also our feature list, link to upgrade instructions, and the new developer documentation. So this concludes the InetSoft 2020 new release webinar. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day.